Those were the days.
Hey guys, Justin Lee Harold here with another edition of Those Were Days Extended. And this week I am taking you back to March 24th, 2015, when Xander Cook arrived in Salem and bumped into our friend here, Mr. Cole Walker. Now, of course, this marks sort of the 10-year anniversary. If you've been online, you've seen not only has Paul been celebrating, but also Days has been celebrating Paul Telfer's 10-year anniversary as Xander Cook here, and very, very well deserved. Xander has been a just fan favorite of ours, and Paul, of course, is a dear, dear friend to the show, and always comes out and supports Dishin Days anytime he can. So yeah, I wanted to kind of take a moment and explore the character of Xander Kiriakis. To start, we're gonna get into a little synopsis here of where Xander came from, and then we'll take a little bit of an interesting turn here. But yeah, just to start, for those that didn't know, actually, Paul actually came on the show or debuted on Days earlier that year. I believe it was early to mid January of 2015. He actually came on as a henchman named Damon, excuse me, for Victor Kiriakis. He had a few scenes with the late great John Aniston, and I think because of those scenes, they really liked Paul and actually sort of invited him back as to play Xander, and sort of debuted a few months later, which is really cool. So he definitely made an impression as Damon, if you remember him back then. But yeah, when Xander arrived in Salem, he hooked up with his old sort of friend and lover, Serena here, as we can see. Oops, excuse me. Where are we at? There we go. Hooked up with his old friend and lover here, Serena Mason, is still diamonds from the elephant statue. And this was actually one of the first sort of big storylines or recurring storylines that Dish and Days tackled, as we were sort of new on air at the time. If you remember, Tony and the guys sort of endlessly talking about this plot. It definitely was not one of their favorites if you go back and look, but I think the highlight of it was that we sort of got Paul out of it. So yeah, so funny if you go back and look at a lot of those scenes. It was a little bit of a chore to get through that storyline, but again, like I said, we sort of got Paul out of it. It was just a bright spot and a really cool, interesting character that we had in Xander. But yeah, back to it. Xander sort of introduces Victor's nephew. He's kind of running some of his criminal enterprises overseas. As we see in that first sort of month, Xander begins to get a little bit too big for his britches and started to sort of thinking he is a lot more powerful and influential than he actually is. So what did Uncle Vic, now we know Father Victor, do is he sort of decided that he wanted to put Xander in his place, and he sort of stripped him of his wealth and power and sort of made him the gardener. So if a lot of you weren't watching at this time, usually whenever anyone sort of wants to cut Xander down to size or sort of throw something in his face, they usually remind him that at one point he very much was the Kiriakis gardener, and it was from this particular period where Victor sort of wanted to punish him and sort of again put him in his place. And so yeah, we had that sort of storyline there. But I kind of wanted to not just look at Xander and take a walk down memory lane of maybe some highlights, but I kind of wanted to do it a different way. I wanted to kind of explore the character through the women he's dated on the show over the past few years specifically, and how each of them has sort of shaped who he is. And we are actually going to start with one of my favorites. The first one here. Oops, keep doing that. Here we go. And this, of course, is none other than Gwen. Gwen to me was sort of like this equal match to Xander. I know Gwen can be a polarizing character, depending on what plot line you find her in or a plot line you're talking about. But I actually really, really like this pairing of them two together. I think they had very much similar backgrounds. They both were raised by addicts. They both had these unstable childhoods. I think they were both sort of longing and desperate to connect sort of to their biological family. I think they found sort of solace in each other. I think they could relate to being outcasts, and at some point or other, both of them or each of them for most of their time in Salem were sort of the town pariahs. And they could also kind of match each other scheme for scheme. So Yeah, that's what I really liked about these two. Very much, again, two sides of the same coin. They actually reminded me of old school Sammy and EJ when they got together. It was like, Sammy was just sort of hell on wheels, and then EJ comes into the picture and he sort of matches her sort of beat for beat. And I think um, that's what they sort of reminded me of here. And usually, sometimes personally, I don't like a pairing if if the people are too similar to each other. I think I like a little bit of a balance or a little bit of an opposite attract sometimes. So again, that's why I'm always a team Lucas in the Sammy EJ thing. But actually, I think it really worked here for Gwen and Xander at this point in their lives. I think they both sort of needed each other. Again, like I said, they found solace in each other. They both sort of had each other's back. The one negative to sort of this pairing is I do think they allowed each other to express sort of their worst traits in each other because they had the support of each other and their backup. I mean, of course, there's sort of the big thing that they sort of did together was steal the spectator back from Jack, Gwen's father, and Xander's best friend. So that's sort of when their sort of evil machinations were sort of enhanced and sort of put to good use, but also against sort of their family and their friends at that point. So, like I said, I like these two together. I wouldn't be opposed. I know we know Gwen is coming back. She's back on the scene. We'll see her soon, probably, maybe even later this month. But I wouldn't I wouldn't mind seeing these two together and maybe another go round of it. We'll see how sort of the Xander Sarah stuff shakes out when the secret maybe is revealed. But yeah, I kind of like these two together. I think there's still a lot of unfinished business there with them. So yeah, I can kind of see maybe a round two for them, or at least some flirting, mild, maybe like friendship with them. We'll see. Next person, and this one was an incredibly interesting out of nowhere pairing that I don't think any of us saw actually. Um, and this was, of course, the Xander and Chloe relationship. Again, like I said, this one completely came out of nowhere. If you had asked us at the time, this was a point where Sarah was off canvas for a little while. If you had asked us who I think Xander or they were going to pair Xander up with or put him up with, Chloe would have sort of been the last on the list. I think they stuck with a really great through line for her in terms of hating Xander. I think she was in the past a recipient of his worst trait, which is his cruelty. So I like the fact that they sort of allowed her to harbor anger and resentment towards him over the years. Whenever they interacted, there was always tension and things like that. There was a little bit of regret from Xander, but not much. And then sort of them two coming together again just came sort of out of left field. It was a big surprise, but I think it really worked. And of course, she hated him, if you don't remember, for leaving her on the island to fend for herself with Mateo and sort of not letting anyone know that she was there, even after him and Teresa got back to Salem. He sort of kept that a secret, which was just awful and just despicable. So I think when the powers that be put these two together, I think a lot of us were cautious about how this pairing was going to turn out. Again, their relationship in the past was not that friendly and warm. But surprising, I gotta say, I really came to like these two. I think in the beginning, it was more about maybe them becoming friends and seeing them around each other a little bit more. And it was, I think a lot of us were very cautious about, let's see how this goes. I don't know about this pairing. Of course, they're incredibly two talented, beautiful people with Paul and Nadia here with this pairing. But yeah, I think it was still sort of cautious. Do we like them as friends? Do we like them as roommates? But what I really appreciate is that they took the time to establish them as friends. And you sort of saw the journey that Chloe was on to actually get to forgiveness of Xander and what he did to her. And you actually saw that. I think they took the time to do that with this couple. I think with Chloe, Xander allowed himself to really decide who he wanted to be without sort of the safety net of Sarah sort of being there and keeping him honest and staying on top of him to make sure he didn't fall back into sort of his old tricks. And I think with Chloe, he was trying to be perfect, not to match her, but wanted to be in a place where he could have a fully functioning adult relationship without sort of pretending to work at it, which was good. And I think the relationship with Chloe was, I think, a real sort of turning point. And I think it sort of primed a character like Xander before Sarah came back into the picture with Victoria. And I think this was the relationship that sort of ushered him into that, I think, which was really great. So I have a lot of fondness for that relationship. I think it had its place in its time, and I think they ended on a good note. So, I think that if Nadia does come back to the show, whether or not they put them together, I think they've established enough of an interesting friendship with them. So if she did come back to the show, there's a solid foundation for them to continue on as good friends and be really cool with each other. So I really like that. But of course, the couple that has been through the ups and downs, Xander's lifelong, love of his life, his current wife and mother of his child. Of course, we have, oops, keep doing that. Of course, we have Sarah here, better known as Zara. I think just the chemistry these two have is just undeniable. I think, like I said, I've liked him in other pairings. I sort of liked her in other pairings as well, but just these two together, I think Paul and Lindsay have really dedicated a lot of time to sort of understanding why this pairing works. I think they're polar opposites, which I think in the beginning was the appeal. It was she was the good girl, he was the bad guy, but it just worked. And I think over time, they've really shown us that each of them has cared for each other and had an influence on each other in many different ways. So I think these two have just sold it. And I think with this sort of latest iteration, we've really got sort of full circle moment for them. I think we see Xander as a fully realized husband and father, sort of wanting to be a better man for Sarah and his daughter. We saw through that Xander was able to open up himself up to forgiveness of his mother. We saw with Fiona. We saw his devotion to Sarah during her accident and paralysis. I think we've gotten him sort of over the threshold of just being the villain guy with a little bit of a heart of gold or some sympathy there. I think he's officially crossed that mark there. But yeah, again, sometimes he's not fully there, sometimes misguided. He reverts back to his old ways, but I think at least now it feels different. I think he's doing it in the name of family and not sort of money or power. And I think the appeal of Sarah and Xander is that they're the couple who, again, started on polar opposites, but have sort of met each other in the middle in a lot of ways. We talked about Xander's journey, but also with Sarah, she's come over to the dark side a little bit more in the last few years. I think she's represented that she very much is down to scheme or hide things or be a little manipulative if she feels like it's in her best interest or her husband's or her family's. And so, we'll see how this sort of latest plotline with them shakes out. Again, we've said on the show, we would very much love for this to sort of be a little blip on their road to happiness, but we'll see. I don't know if it really pushes Xander over the edge and he wants to sort of leave Sarah, if this is a separation for them. We'll see. Or maybe, like we said, or like we hope, it just becomes a bump in the road for them. But yeah, I think again, shout out to Lindsay and Paul in particular, who have really worked on making this a solid couple who we root for. And even when we break up, we understand. But I think they've established that they're becoming one of sort of Days' definitely rootable super couples. So yeah, it was a trip down memory lane for Xander there by some of the women he's dated and indulged in over the years. So yeah, and again, big happy 10th anniversary to Paul Telfer. So thanks, guys. That was this week's edition of Those Are the Days Extended, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.
Those were the